These mountains are not decoration. They are not backdrop. The Appalachians are 300 million years old, the oldest mountain range in North America. And they have been watching human beings move through them since before human beings had words for what they felt in the dark. And what they felt, what people have felt here for 10,000 years, is that they are not alone. The 5 stories in this collection are rooted in documented events. Court records, newspaper archives, police reports, the testimony of survivors still living. Where names have been withheld, families asked. Where names are used, the record is public. What happened in these hollows is real. What continues to happen is real. The mountains don't make things up. They don't need to. No, something has been following people in the Daniel Boone National Forest for decades. Laurel County, Kentucky, 1974 to present. Here is what Ranger Dale Combs will tell you, if you catch him on the right evening with a cup of coffee and no tape recorder. The first time he heard the sound was 1987. He was on a welfare check, hiking into a backcountry campsite where a family had been overdue to sign out. The trail was standard, switchbacks up a ridge, mature hardwood on both sides, nothing unusual. He had done that trail 60 times. He knew where the deer crossed, he knew where the creek ran, he knew the sounds. What he heard that night was not a sound he knew. It was bipedal. That was the first thing his brain registered. 2-footed, heavy, see moving through the underbrush parallel to the trail and approximately 40 feet to his right. Not running, not crashing, moving deliberately. Matching his pace, he stopped. It stopped. He walked. It walked. Dale Combs has spent a career in those woods. He knows the difference between a black bear, which moves quadrupedally, which crashes, which huffs, and something that chooses not to show itself. He shone his light into the trees. Nothing. He called out, using the standard ranger challenge, identifying himself as federal law enforcement. The sound paused. Then, from the dark, at a distance he later estimated at 30 feet, something knocked twice on a tree trunk. Hard, deliberate, not a falling branch, not a woodpecker. 2 knocks, spaced like a response. And Dale Combs finished his welfare check at a fast walk and drove himself home and drank an entire pot of coffee and did not tell his supervisor. He told his wife. His wife, a Harlan County woman whose grandmother had grown up on stories of what lived in the deep hollows, listened without surprise and said, "Stay on the trail next time." 1974. A logging crew near Stinking Creek reports a figure watching them from the tree line over 3 consecutive days. The figure does not move when machinery runs. It does not flee when approached. On the 3rd day, when 2 workers walk toward it, it retreats, upright, fast on 2 legs, into a stand of hemlock so dense a man could not pass through it. The loggers find, at the tree line, a line of footprints pressed 7 inches into soft soil, human-shaped, 17 inches long. The foreman photographs them with a Polaroid. The Polaroid survives. The Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife classifies the incident as unknown large animal, species unverified. It is never reclassified. 1991. A group of 7 college students camping on Laurel Ridge wake at 3 a.m. to the sound of something circling their campsite at a distance of perhaps 50 yards. They hear it for 45 minutes. It does not come closer. It does not leave. One of the students, a pre-med sophomore named Jennifer Watts, who later becomes a surgeon, will spend the next 30 years telling the story at dinner parties. Not because she can explain it, but because the sound was unlike anything a rational person could account for. Like breathing, she says, but the breathing of something very, very large. And it was interested in us. Well, whatever it was interested in us. 2009. A trail camera set by a wildlife biologist studying black bear population density near Bark Camp Lake captures, at 2:17 a.m., a single frame of something bipedal crossing the trail. The frame is blurred. Motion blur, not camera malfunction. Dr. Reginald Foss of Eastern Kentucky University submits the image to 3 colleagues for independent analysis. 2 say bear, walking upright, which bears occasionally do. 1 says the proportions are wrong. The limb-to-torso ratio is inconsistent with ursine anatomy. Dr. Foss publishes a careful, hedged paper. He does not claim to know what it is. He claims to not know what it is. There is a difference. 2019. A mother and her teenage son hiking the Sheltowee Trace National Recreation Trail report independently onto 2 different rangers at 2 different trailheads, the same encounter, a smell like wet dog and sulfur, then a sound like wood being snapped deliberately, then silence so total it felt, the mother says, pressurized. Her son, 14, tells his ranger, whatever it was deciding something about us. The rangers compare notes that evening. The reports, filed separately, describe the same location, the same sequence, the same smell. Ranger Dale Combs retired in 2019. At his retirement party, sheet cake, blue frosting, thanks Dale. He gave a short speech. He talked about the forest, about what it meant to spend a career in a place most people only visited. He said, I've seen things in those woods I can't explain. I've heard things I can't explain. And I've made my peace with that. I mean, the forest doesn't owe you an explanation. It was there before you. It'll be there after. Someone in the back of the room, an older man in flannel. Nobody recognized him. Nobody thought to ask his name. Started clapping first. He was gone before the cake was cut. It began with sounds. That is how it always begins. John Bell's first written record of the disturbance describes the gnawing and knocking on the walls of the house as though an animal were scratching to enter. He investigated. He found nothing. He checked for rats. He checked the foundation. Nothing. Then the sounds moved inside. Chains being dragged across the floor at night. Stones dropped from empty ceilings. The noise of something large turning over in an empty room. John Bell is a deacon of Red River Baptist Church. A man of deliberate temperament who does not believe in what he cannot see. He begins to believe. Then it finds a voice. It hated John Bell. The entity showed preferences. It was gentle with Lucy Bell. It would occasionally stroke her hair in the night, press fresh fruit into her hands from thin air, speak to her in a tone witnesses described as almost tender. With visitors, it was frequently charming. It loved to perform for audiences, to engage in theological debate with ministers who came to investigate and left confused and, more than one of them, frightened. With John Bell, it was merciless. It pulled his shoes off in the night. It slapped him awake. Because it twisted his face into contortions the family described as seizures, but that Bell himself said felt like invisible hands gripping his jaw and pulling. It pulled his hair until tufts came loose. It screamed at him. It told him, in front of his family and his minister, that he would not live to see another year. That it had come for him specifically. That whatever it was, it had business with John Bell that would only end one way. John Bell died in December 1820. He was found in bed, unresponsive, a strange vial of dark liquid on his bedside table. The doctor could not identify the substance. The family poured some of it down the throat of the family cat. The cat died immediately. John Bell was 59 and had been in reasonable health. The entity, on the morning of his death, It was heard by multiple family members singing and laughing in the empty house. Jackson arrived with a party of several men, jovial and skeptical. They made camp on the Bell property. Then, on the road approaching the farm, his wagon stopped. The wheels turned, the horses pulled. The wagon did not move. Jackson checked the wheels. Nothing was blocking them. He had his men push. Nothing. The horses strained. Nothing. The wagon sat on flat ground in the middle of a road, locked in place by something invisible, for a period estimated at several minutes. Then a voice came from nowhere. It said, and this is from Jackson's own account, relayed to multiple witnesses. "All right, General, let the wagon move." The wagon moved. Jackson, "I'd rather fight the entire British Army again than spend another night on that farm." And he left the next morning. The return. That should be the end. It isn't. The Bell Witch is documented history through 1821, when the entity announced it was leaving and the disturbances ceased. It told Lucy Bell it would return in 7 years. In 1828, minor disturbances were reported by John Bell Jr. They lasted weeks and stopped. It said, when asked, it would return again in 107 years. In 1935, in Adams, Tennessee, a family living near the original Bell Farm site began reporting, in language almost identical to the 1817 accounts, knockings in the walls, a voice, disturbances at night. The father of the family, Howard Sims, was found dead in his bed in November 1935, under circumstances the county coroner marked as cardiac event, cause uncertain. He was 53 years old, with no history of heart disease. His wife told the attending physician, "It was in the room when he died. I could hear it laughing." The case was closed. The family moved to Nashville. The property sat empty for 20 years. It sits empty still. Since 1974, more than 900 people have gone missing in or near U.S. national parks. Some of them were on the most famous trail in the world. Multiple locations, 1974 to 2022. The Appalachian Trail stretches 2,190 miles from Springer Mountain, Georgia, to Mount Katahdin, Maine. Approximately 3 million people hike portions of it every year. It is arguably the most mapped, most photographed trail in the world, and it swallows people without a trace. The National Park Service does not maintain a publicly accessible unified database of missing persons in or near national park lands. But this is not a conspiracy theory. It is a bureaucratic reality. Missing persons cases in national parks are handled by multiple overlapping jurisdictions: NPS rangers, county sheriffs, state police, FBI when warranted, each keeping separate records, none automatically sharing with a central repository. The man who first noticed the statistical implications of this was not a law enforcement officer or scientist. He was a retired police detective from California named David Paulides, who spent a decade filing FOIA requests and building the database himself. What he found was this: the missing share patterns that defy conventional explanation. The disappearances frequently occur in good weather. They frequently involve experienced outdoors people. They frequently occur near water. The bodies, when found, are often found in locations search teams had already covered, sometimes swept multiple times, with no explanation for why they hadn't been found. And in a disturbing number of cases, the bodies show no clear cause of death consistent with the circumstances. No broken bones from a fall, no signs of hypothermia in warm weather, no predator activity. And then there are the ones never found. The following accounts are from documented cases. 1974, Dennis Martin, age 6, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Tennessee. Dennis was hiking with his family on Father's Day weekend on the Spencefield Trail. He was playing with 3 other boys, a game where they would jump out and surprise the adults on the trail ahead. The other 3 boys came out of the woods. Dennis did not. The search that followed was the largest in National Park Service history to that point. Over 1,400 searchers, including Green Berets from Fort Bragg, deployed for nearly 2 weeks. A family driving a nearby road reported seeing a disheveled, wild-looking man crossing the road carrying what appeared to be a large bundle of clothing. They thought nothing of it at the time. Dennis Martin was never found. He would be 63 years old today. Think about that. 63 years old today. 1997. Craig Caudle, age 31, Red River Gorge, Kentucky. An experienced rock climber and outdoorsman. He went into the gorge alone on a Tuesday in October for a day climb he had done 15 times before. His car was found at the trailhead Wednesday. Search teams covered the area for 4 days. On day 5, a search dog hit a scent trail leading to the base of a cliff Craig had never been known to climb. A cliff experienced local climbers described as beyond his gear level. No body was ever recovered. The cliff face showed no sign of a fall, no equipment marks, no blood, no disturbed vegetation on the approach. 2014. A couple from Asheville, North Carolina, names withheld by family request, were hiking the AT section near Hot Springs when they separated briefly on a wide, well-marked trail. The husband was 50 feet ahead. He turned around in under 2 minutes. His wife was not on the trail. He called for her. He searched. He flagged down another hiker within 10 minutes. Rangers were on scene within 40 minutes. 73 searchers over 3 days found no trace, no clothing, no pack which she was wearing, no footprints off the trail. Her prints ended, literally ended, as though she had simply stopped existing at a particular point on the trail. She was found 11 days later, 7 miles away, in a deep creek hollow the search had covered twice. She was alive, sitting upright against a tree, in what appeared to be a meditative position. Dehydrated but otherwise uninjured, she could not account for any of the 11 days. Her last memory was of the vista overlooked, looking back to see if her husband had caught up. She does not talk to reporters. She moved away from Asheville. She asked her family to say only this, if asked: wife through family. Something showed her things she did not want to see. David Paulides was asked in a 2021 interview what he believed was responsible. He paused for a long time. Paulides: I don't speculate publicly about cause. What I can tell you is what the data shows. And what the data shows is that something is happening in these places that we do not understand. The fact that we don't understand it does not mean it isn't happening. It just means we haven't caught up yet. He was asked, what does it feel like to spend years immersed in these cases? Paulides: like standing at the edge of something very large and very little light. You know it's there. You can feel it. You just can't see the shape of it. The Appalachian Trail Association estimates that statistically, 1 thru hiker in every 250,000 who attempts the full trail will not return home. By their numbers, that is roughly 1 person every 4 years. Over 50 years of record keeping, those numbers accumulate into a quiet, steady, unremarked toll of human beings who walked into the oldest mountains in North America and became part of them. The mountains keep their dead. They always have. The most feared faith healer in Appalachian history. And what happened to those who crossed her? Ashe County, North Carolina, 1889 to 1947. This story has a monster. The monster is real. Her name was Marguerite Maggie Prophet Greer. She stood 6 feet tall in her bare feet. She could lift a full rain barrel over her head until she was 70. And she delivered over 1,200 babies across 40 years in the mountains of Ashe County, North Carolina. Exactly 0 of her deliveries resulted in maternal death. 0. In an era when Appalachian women died in childbirth at catastrophic rates, Maggie Greer lost no mothers. None. She was beloved. She was feared. And she was, depending on who you asked, either the most gifted natural healer in the history of the Carolina Mountains, or something significantly more complicated than that. Let's start with the good parts. Because there were good parts, and Maggie Greer deserves her due before the darkness. Maggie learned medicine, she would not have called it that, from her grandmother, who had learned from hers, in an unbroken chain of women's knowledge stretching back into the pre-contact period when Cherokee healers and Scots-Irish settlers were, in the mountain hollows, more likely to share information than fight over it. She knew plants the way a scholar knows text, deep, cross-referenced, contextual. Which bark to brew for fever, which roots would slow a hemorrhage, which poultice drew infection from a wound that would otherwise go septic. Ethnobotanists from the University of North Carolina would later document her knowledge as genuinely remarkable, containing treatments that modern pharmacology has since validated. She was also funny. Wickedly, specifically funny. The kind of funny that comes from spending 40 years watching human beings at their most vulnerable and most ridiculous. She had a saying for everything. A man who won't let a woman doctor him will let a fever bury him. Garlic in the sock cures a cold in the chest and keeps your relatives at a Christian distance. Prayer helps, but so does willow bark. God made both. Now the darkness. Maggie Greer kept a book. She called it her accounting. It was, by the description of the one person who claims to have read it in full, her granddaughter Vera, who spoke about it once to a Folklore archives researcher in 1984 before refusing all further comment. A record of every person Maggie had helped. And beside certain names, a second column. What those names owed her. This was not unusual in the context of mountain medicine. Healers were often paid in goods, labor, or future obligations rather than cash. What was unusual was what Maggie considered appropriate payment, and what happened to those who declined. 1921. Roy Eggers of Laurel Creek refused to send the cord of firewood he'd promised after Maggie brought his wife through a difficult twin delivery. He told a neighbor, "That old woman can whistle for it. I don't owe her nothing." Within the month, both of Roy Eggers' teams of draft horses, animals in prime health, be insured for a significant sum, died of a sudden paralytic illness the county veterinarian could not identify. Roy Eggers sent the firewood. He sent double. He sent it personally. He never spoke Maggie's name again without removing his hat. 1928. The Carver family on Elk Knob refused Maggie's services for their daughter's confinement. They had a new doctor from Boone, educated, certified, progressive. Maggie, when informed, said only, "That's their right." The doctor from Boone arrived 3 weeks later to find the road to Elk Knob flooded by a rain event so localized that no other farm in the county had received more than a sprinkle. He could not reach the Carver farm. Maggie could. She knew a path through the trees that no wagon could take, but a woman on foot knew well. The daughter and baby survived. The doctor from Boone, but when he finally got through 2 days later, asked the father what had broken the fever. The father said one word, "Maggie." The doctor wrote in his case notes, "Treatment by local healer, result satisfactory, method unknown." 1934. A county official named Delbert Marsh, attempting to formalize medicine licensing under a new state statute, sent Maggie a letter informing her that she was practicing medicine without a license and must cease immediately. She appeared at his office the following Tuesday morning and set the letter on his desk, unsigned. She looked at him for a long moment. He later told his wife she looked at him the way a cat looks at a mouse it's not hungry enough to bother with yet. And she said, "I delivered you. February 1891. Your mama hemorrhaged. I stopped it. You'd like me to stop practicing? Think carefully." And Delbert. She turned and walked out. Delbert Marsh did not follow up on the licensing matter. He was, for the remainder of his life, conspicuously healthy and conspicuously careful. The 13 farms. Over the course of her career, Maggie Greer was refused payment by 13 households. Not delayed payment, refusal. Explicit, deliberate repudiation of debt. In 12 of the 13 cases, the family experienced, within 1 year, a catastrophic event. Fire, livestock death, crop failure, or, in 3 cases, the sudden, unexplained death of the household patriarch. In all 12 cases, county and state records show natural causes were determined. No investigation of Maggie Greer was ever opened. The 13th family was the Praters of 3 Top Mountain. They refused Maggie payment in 1939, loudly and publicly, when their patriarch stood on his porch and called her a witch and a fraud and a criminal in front of 6 witnesses. Maggie stood in his yard and listened to all of it. When he was finished, she said, I know everything you are, Cleet Prater. I have known since the night I brought you into this world. You sleep on that. Nothing happened to the Prater farm. No fire, no death, no disaster. Cleet Prater lived to 92. He outlived 2 of his children, all 3 of his brothers, and most of his neighbors. He was sharp-minded until the end. His great-granddaughter, interviewed for this script, says he spent the last decade of his life sleeping with the lights on and waking up screaming from dreams he would not describe. Maggie Greer died in 1947 at the age of 89. The county sent a representative to her funeral. The churches of 4 denominations sent their ministers. The mountain roads for 10 miles were lined with people who stood in the cold December air with their hats in their hands and did not make a sound as her casket was carried past. Her accounting book was buried with her. Her granddaughter Vera insisted on it. When asked why, Vera said only, because the debts in it aren't finished, and she's the only one who should hold them now. A cleared patch of mountainside in Ashe County where 13 farmhouses once stood. 7 of the farms are gone. Foundation stones only, reclaimed by forest. 6 are still occupied. One owner, a woman in her 60s who asked not to be named, keeps a jar of sourwood honey on her porch railing at all times. Asked why, she says her grandmother told her to, and her grandmother's grandmother told her to. Or and you don't ask questions about some things, you just keep the jar full. State Route 666, McDowell County, West Virginia, and what the miners' wives heard in the dark. McDowell County, West Virginia, 1907 to present day. This story begins underground. That is where so many Appalachian stories begin. In the dark below the mountain, where men went in every morning and understood, with a certainty their families shared but never spoke aloud, that they might not come back out. McDowell County, West Virginia, at its peak in the 1940s and 50s, produced more coal per square mile than anywhere else on Earth. It was called the billion-dollar coal field. Its towns, Welch, Keystone, North Fork, War, were packed tight into mountain hollows where the sun cleared the ridgelines for perhaps 5 hours a day, where the company owned the houses and the stores, and sometimes, effectively, the men. The miners made money. The company made more. The mountains gave up their insides and got nothing back. In December of 1907, the Monongah mining disaster, 60 miles north in Marion County, killed 362 men in a single explosion. It remains the worst mining disaster in American history. The shockwave of grief that moved through the coal communities of West Virginia that winter was something people described for decades afterward as almost physical. A pressure in the chest that wouldn't lift. A silence in the women's faces that was different from the ordinary silence of hard times. That winter in McDowell County, the crying began. What the neighbors heard in the months that followed was crying, not weeping, crying. The kind that comes after the weeping is done, when the body has nothing left but the sound itself. A low, sustained, atonal sound that carries differently from other sounds, that moves through walls and trees and the winter dark in a way that other sounds do not. The four women. Their names deserve saying: Clara Akers, Bessie Dotson, Ruth Ann Compton, and Nell Stratton. Clara was 23 with 2 children. Bessie was 31 with 4. Ruth Ann was 19 and 7 months pregnant when her husband died. Nell was 44 and had been in the mountains her whole life and knew exactly what this meant and cried anyway. By spring, all 4 women had been evicted from their company houses. That was the system. You worked, you lived there. Your husband stopped. By dying, you left. 3 of the 4 went to live with relatives. On the 4th, Nell Stratton, the oldest, the one with no family within traveling distance, was found in early April of 1908 at the side of what would later become Route 666, sitting in the road in the pre-dawn hours, crying. Not distressed, not confused, just sitting upright in the road, crying steadily in the cold. The neighbor who found her walked her home. He asked if she was all right. She said, "I heard the others." He asked what others. She said, "The ones before. They were all here tonight. They wanted me to know I wasn't the first." She went inside. She made coffee. She lived another 31 years, died in her own bed, and never explained what she meant. What comes after? The crying on Route 666 has been reported, with unsettling regularity ever since. Not always, not every night, not even most nights, but enough nights, across enough decades, from enough unconnected witnesses, that it has become, in McDowell County, a background fact of the landscape. The way you might note that a particular creek floods in heavy rain, or that a certain hollow loses its cell signal. You note it. You file it. You don't examine it too closely. 1952. A state highway worker named Eugene Bevins, doing overnight road maintenance on Route 666 in July, stopped his equipment because he could hear from the creek side of the road crying. He assumed someone was hurt. He searched the creek bank for 45 minutes with a lantern. He found nobody. He went back to his equipment, and the sound was gone. He told his wife. His wife said, "Don't go back on that road at night." He didn't ask her why. He already knew why. 1978. A journalist from the Charleston Gazette, doing a feature on the abandoned coal towns of McDowell County, drove Route 666 on a November evening and heard what she described in her field notes as a sound like multiple women crying coming from no identifiable source, lasting approximately 4 minutes. She included this in her feature. Her editor cut it. She kept her field notes. Her granddaughter has them. 2003, three teenagers from Welch drove Route 666 on a dare with a video camera. The footage shows the road, the dark, the creek glinting in the headlights. At the 5-minute mark, the audio distorts, not static, but a wavering, multi-tonal sound that audio engineers who have analyzed the clip describe as consistent with human vocalization, multiple simultaneous sources, her gender presenting as female. The teenagers in the car are silent for the duration. When the sound stops, one of them says very quietly, "Go, just go." The video has 2.3 million views on YouTube. The comment section is unusually respectful. 2021, Dr. Amara Washington, a historian at West Virginia University, published a monograph on the social history of McDowell County's coal communities. In the final chapter, she addresses the Route 666 phenomenon directly. She writes, and this is quoted from her published academic work, Dr. Washington, what is being heard on Route 666, whatever its origin, is a memory made audible. The grief of the coal communities was real, sustained, and largely unwitnessed by the broader culture. These were women and children who were not counted in the death tolls, who were evicted from their homes within weeks of their husbands' deaths, who received no compensation, no recognition, no acknowledgement that their suffering mattered. If the land holds memory, and the indigenous traditions of this region have always held that it does, then it would hold this specific thing, this sound. She pauses in the interview, then adds, Dr. Washington, I drove that road at night when I was researching the book. I needed to see it. I heard it. Whatever it is not frightening. That's the thing nobody says. People expect it to be frightening. It isn't. It's grief that has been there so long it's become part of the geography. It's the sound of people who were not counted, counting themselves. I sat in my car on the side of the road and I wept. And it felt like the right thing to do. On Clara Akers' great-granddaughter, a retired schoolteacher named Patricia, living in Bluefield, West Virginia, was told this story at her grandmother's knee. She drove Route 666 on the anniversary of the Monongah disaster, December 6th, every year for 20 years, until her eyesight got too poor for night driving. She did it in the morning instead. She said what she was doing was bearing witness. She said the road needed someone to do that. She said, Patricia, those women worked as hard as the men and grieved harder and were forgotten faster. The least I can do is drive past and let them know somebody remembers. The mountains remember. But it helps, I think, when a person does too.